Inside Out 2 is the newest Pixar movie directed by Kelsey Mann and is the sequel to the 2015 crowd pleaser Inside Out, and fittingly enough, it gave me mixed emotions. There's been a lot of hype and concern surrounding this movie ever since it was announced. On the one hand, the first movie was an instant classic when it came out, and if there were ever a movie in Pixar's library that warranted a sequel, that would be it. On the other hand, Pixar has been in a bit of a slump recently, with their new movies making very little in returns, audience interest dwindling. Even the trailers for this movie didn't look the best. I went in with wavered expectations, and while it's not as good as the first, it's still a cute movie and it's one of the better things Pixar has put out recently. Now, I actually rewatched the first movie to prepare for the sequel, so real quick, let me give you my thoughts on the first Inside Out so you know where my head's at coming into this one. I really loved the first movie when I watched it as a kid, and rewatching it all these years later, it still holds up. Even though the concept of what goes on inside a person's mind isn't super original, it is very creative in how they execute the concept and portray these abstract ideas. There are a lot of fun gags mixed with plenty of tender moments, and its ending message of embracing both the good and the bad emotions is very mature and important. Admittedly, watching it as an adult felt very different from watching it as a kid. There's a lot of things I picked up on now that I just wouldn't have watching it for the first time, like how jarring it is that her emotions switch on the turn of a dime, to the point where she might as well be diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder. I also didn't catch that very weird line from the mom where she says, "If we just keep smiling for Dad, everything will be okay." Like, wow, way to pile on the pressure even harder. Also, yeah, I get the emotions are meant to be metaphors, but there are some points where they kind of lean into it a bit too hard. Like when her islands of personality all go down at the end, and it basically implies for a brief moment that she has no personality. Again, these aren't really critiques as they are funny quirks that come from watching it through the eyes of a 23-year-old versus the 14-year-old, and they don't really impact my thoughts on the movie. The animation is still great, the music is really well produced, and it's overall a really solid movie. It felt like it marked a turning point for Pixar, where they were ready to start exploring more challenging concepts and catering to both adults and children again. For the most part. If somehow you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it in a while, definitely give it a watch. I'd give it a 4 out of 5. Now we move on to Inside Out 2. I'm going to try to keep this light on spoilers, but I might let a couple things slip, so if you want to go in without knowing anything, then just skip to the end to see what I rated it. Overall, the movie was good, and I had a fun time watching it for the most part, but I don't think it's going to be the instant classic the first movie was. While it does introduce a lot of new concepts and tackles a lot more complex ideas, it does so by way of recycling a lot of elements from the first movie's plot, and even recycling the message. Granted, the message is still valid about how every aspect of a person, both good and bad, is important and shouldn't be suppressed, and the way they reach that conclusion is really well done, but the steps getting to that point did feel a bit too familiar. It was kind of weird how they basically implied that once you hit puberty, you become a terrible person, and that 180 that Riley's personality takes felt a bit too fast. Like in the first, at least there was somewhat of a gradual decline, whereas here, she just becomes a bitch literally overnight. The old characters are still very likable, and they all go through their own little arcs. Seeing Joy reach her breaking point and realize that she can't fix everything was nicely done, but again, it was already done in the first movie. The new characters they introduce are fine, and the voice actors are solid, but they don't really have much going for them beyond the base level. The only one that really gets fleshed out is Anxiety. She kinda acts as the villain, stressing over Riley's future and trying to alter her personality so she can succeed. And, as I'm sure anyone with severe anxiety could probably guess, it doesn't exactly go well. The comedy wasn't as strong as the first movie, save for a few scenes involving Riley's deepest secrets, which were pretty funny. It goes without saying, the animation throughout is beautiful, the designs of the world are very vibrant and colorful. There is a sequence at the end, though, where you can tell a lot of time and effort went into it, and it is really well done. Overall, the movie is better than I feared it would be, but it's still just shy of what I would call great. Still, it was a fun watch, and it is a sign of better things to come for Pixar. Although, to be honest, their upcoming slate doesn't leave me with much hope. Either way, check this one out if you want, and I'd give it a 3.5 out of 5.